Okay, now I'm ready to shade. You know what? Just for the heck of it, I'll just draw. I'm going to draw the little pole. It's just something else that adds to the realism of the piece to further reinforce that this is just a mannequin. This is not, you know, this is drawn from observation. It is not drawn from my imagination. And it's something that I really saw. So I don't see as much of the wooden platform on this side of the foot. And then I see kind of this the thickness of the wood piece. Okay, and that's going off the paper. So let it go off the paper. And there's an interesting shadow below here on the mannequin stand too. So I'll make sure that I shade that in. Okay, now I'm going to start shading my mannequin, and I'm not going to use a super dark pencil because I want to add darker core shadows. I want to add midtones and things like that later. So I might just want to use a HB pencil. I'm going to use one of my woodless pencils because that allows me to, use the side of the pencil and just very gently, maybe we'll do the head and the neck at the same time, and I'll show you how to apply the shade and the shadowing on that. So I took a HB pencil and I just threw some shading on the head part of my mannequin, and I'm just using this kitchen towel. I wedged it into a little cone shape, and I'm just using the tip of it to blend and just make it nice and even. Nice even coating of pencil. Okay, same thing with my body. Now I'm going to do that next. And just put some pencil on there. If you end up losing some of the detail that you drew in with your very, very light 2H pencil, don't worry about it. You can always go back and look at your mannequin to get that information again. So what I'm doing is I'm just throwing some value on all the different parts of the mannequin, because what I'm saying is that the mannequin is not a white painted mannequin. It is a wood tan colored mannequin, so it should have some value to start with. You should got to put some shading on there. So let's do some of the shading right now on the head parts. So I'm looking at my mannequin, and I'm going to erase up wherever I see highlights. So I see a highlight on the top of the mannequin's head right here. I see highlights kind of in between little eye areas, the little two arches. And I also see reflected light on this mannequin. The right bottom corner of this head is in shadow, but yet I do see a slight like glowing light right here along that edge. That's the reflected light, which is kind of a dirtier highlight than this really bright highlight up here. Also, I'm going to go back in, I'm going to go in with a B pencil, and I'm going to now put in a little bit of shading to kind of sharpen up my angles and details that I see. So I see kind of a darker shadow right along the edge of this little cut area on the face. And overall this side here looks a little bit darker. So I'm going to just put in a little bit of shading here. The underside of this mannequin seems kind of light, so I'm going to draw this kind of interesting cast shadow on the neck, on the bead, which is this little neck bead here. And I'm going to shade it in with a little bit more pressure. Okay, I also see a little bit more of a darker value right here, the top of this arch right here. And maybe this is a little bit too light. I'm going to add a little bit of shading to this area here too. Put that shading back in there. Okay. Even though it may be very, very slight, you still want to put a little bit of shading at the very top of the head if you're not going to, darken the background, or you won't really see where the head, where the top of the head starts. So I would put a little bit of shading right in there. I'm gonna walk away for a second because I need to get something.
What are you doing, India? What's the dragon doing?
I don't know.
Okay.
Mommy,
Bye.
Out of the way.
there's darkness right here.
I'm not
Don't touch
done. Everyone's a critic. Okay.
You missed the spot.
Okay. Is it filming?
Yep. It's
Okay.
gone.
So what I have here are two other tools that you might find very helpful, and these are called blending stumps or tortillons, and they kind of help you to get into little tight areas and also concentrate the pressure, since the pressure is like right here at the tip. When you're pressing, it will really push down and smooth your shading and blend your shading a little bit better. So I'm going to add a little bit more shading here, maybe do a little cross hatching. So, my students learn to do cross hatching, just shading by scribbling, and also they learned sgraffito. So you could use any of those techniques right here in this lesson to shade the mannequin. Okay, that pretty much the head of the mannequin is done at this point. And I think that this little blending stump is really proving to be very useful. I'm just doing a little cross hatching here. Okay, now we're going to highlight this little ball that is the neck, And I see that the highlight starts on the left and kind of goes diagonally across the neck. And then the core shadow, or the shadow edge, is this kind of dark area right here. And that's the darkest part of the shading on a form. So what that will do is just make this little wooden bead, that's the neck, a lot rounder looking. And there is definitely a little reflected light on this side. So everything that we learned about shading when we were shading the spheres is kind of coming into play here when we're shading this little mannequin figure's neck. You might want to make the shadow from the head here a little bit darker, more dramatic if you want. Okay. Okay, now we are going to shade with a highlight the chest. I see this really bright shadow right over here, and it's kind of going around and illuminating right here, this shoulder. I see a light area right here on the left side of this little upside down teardrop shaped flat area. And then the opposite of that would be this kind of dark shadow on the other side of the teardrop. My daughter just pointed that out. Oh, Mommy, there's a shadow there. And I had to tell her, I haven't gotten to it yet. Calm down. There's also a shadow, slight shadow right here. So I'm just going to take kind of like my dirty blending tool and just throw a little bit of shading from over here onto there. And then just kind of lighten up this top area a little bit more. If you lighten things up and then it's too light, you could always go back and use that kind of dirty blender to lighten it, to darken it back up again. You can press a little bit more lightly and remove some of the highlighting around the top of this form. I just love using this little dirty blender because it always has just the right amount of pencil on it. So I just want to make this a little bit darker. So I'll dare to use a 2B. You can't get a darker value with an HB pencil as you would with a higher B pencil. Although you could get a pretty decent range of values, there is a limit to how dark you can get it. So it kind of does matter, having at your disposal some of these special B pencils. So I lightened up this area right next to this kind of dark area right here. And what happens when I do that is you're increasing the contrast. Also, right under this arm bead, like the armpit area, there's a dark kind of line right here that's kind of like a crack in the opening here, like between the bead and this little open area that of the chest. And also there's like a little cast shadow right here. So you might want to do that cast shadow and then kind of fade the cast shadow out. Okay, now we're going to shade the belly ball here, this little ball here. There's a cast shadow that goes kind of diagonally from left to right. I'm going to darken that up. This is a B pencil, just like it's a 1B basically, because it just says B on the pencil. Also, I'm going to lighten it up with a kneaded eraser, just give it a nice soft highlight on the left side of this little bead here. That is its belly. And I'm going to put in a little bit more highlighting. Maybe use a little bit of cross hatching here. There is a core shadow, and I'd say if there was a core shadow, it would definitely be something like this. There's a little bit of reflected light even in the shadow areas, and definitely right on along the edge right here. Just want to dirty that back up again. Maybe I made it a little too bright. And then there's a dark shadow right here. Right here at the base of the little ball bead. And I could also see the top edge of
Concentrate.
the top edge of this hip right here. Okay. I want to highlight kind of this cut area on the hip area of the mannequin right here. Highlight that, and then do the opposite. Put a shadow on the other side here. I see a core shadow here on the side of the hip of the mannequin here, so I might want to just add a little bit of shadow, a little cross hatching right here. Also, I see a cast shadow from this arm, so I'm gonna put it here. When you're drawing from observation, all the information is right in front of you. You just have to interpret it through your drawing. It's all there. I want to just lighten up this little edge right here. That's the top edge of the little piece of wood. Kind of shows how thick the little piece of wood is. The ball bead here, right here, I would say the core shadow for that would be right here. So do a little core shadow, make it kind of dark under here. Just put some shading overall. And the blender is really good because it just lets you just put some shading overall into small little shapes like that. I would also put a little bit of value right here on this little ball joint on the left side here. Left side, and it's actually the mannequin's right thigh area. Okay, now I could just use this eraser to kind of erase up a little bit of reflected light, which is at the bottom of the ball and also at the back right here, and also right here on this opposite side right here. And then go back in, and I'm going to draw that little slot. That, and I see a little bit of the slot right there. And I'm going to draw okay. Let's shade the leg parts. Right now, ignore the wood grain. You don't have to draw the wood grain. That's if you want to be very detailed, you want to be extra, go for it. But I'm just showing straight shading. So I'm going to put down a little bit of 2B over this whole thigh part. If you go out of the lines a little bit, it's okay. You can erase it and clean it up later. I'm going to shade that thigh part. Shade that thigh part here. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of shading on the lower leg here. And let's do all of these arm parts and leg parts all at once. Why? Because you have to do 6 of these. If you're one of my students and you have quite a few to do, so you want to kind of hurry things along. Okay, so now I'm gonna just rub the shading in. Okay. Here's the hand. Put a little bit of the HB over there. Put it on the knees and the shoulders and the elbows too. Just rub it all in there. Okay. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take the kneaded eraser and I'm going to erase out all the highlights. So the highlight here. There's definitely a highlight here, right here. There's also a little bit of reflected light on that side. Kind of odd little bit of reflected light on this. So I'm not pressing on as hard with the kneaded eraser. There's definitely a highlight on the right side of the hand and the right side of the mannequin arm. But you don't want that part to disappear into the background whiteness. So you do want to go back in with a, might say an H pencil or a B pencil, maybe a 1B, and kind of, don't put an outline there, but kind of blend the line there. Blend from that line a little bit inward toward this, kind of toward the interior of the arm. Then take a little blender, just so that you can kind of see the edge of that arm and doesn't get lost in this bright white background. If you want to, you could just put in a background tone, but that's really not necessary. Okay, so now you got a shiny arm there. Definitely have a highlight right here, kind of on the left half of that. There's definitely a highlight on the top of this, kind of like the front part of this arm joint. Highlight kind of on the top of that arm. I also see a little bit of reflected light on the bottom. The open part of the hand is definitely a lighter color, so look how quickly this highlighting is happening. It's just happening very, very quickly. Put a little bit more highlight on that part. Highlight, not right on the edge, but a little bit inward on the top of the thigh here. And the lower leg doesn't really seem to have any kind of dramatic highlight, just overall a little bit more, like a little bit of lightness, but the lower leg seems to be kind of overall a little darker than the upper leg. A little bit of lightness on the front of that.